let's be clear. There is a clear double standard in the ethics, in the morality, and the legality of how black politicians versus white politicians are handled in the state of Michigan. When the former mayor was accused of indiscretions of a personal level, both he and his wife, I might add, were hounded unmercifully. When this mayor is accused of indiscretions, he's not hounded, nor was his wife hounded unmercifully. He, in fact, told the media to stand down, and they did. So let's make no mistake about it. There is a double standard. When we had a black city council person accused of malfeasance in office, she was summarily removed. When we had a white council person accused of malfeasance, he's been allowed to serve out his term with dignity and respect. Let us make no mistake about it. This election is clearly about race. It's about a race to determine whether or not this administration will be held accountable. It's a race about determining whether our neighborhoods will be impacted by any type of recovery. It's a race to determine whether or not our children will be treated with respect. It's about a race to determine whether or not the handling of demolition in this city, where unions were promised that they would hold a meaningful job and play a meaningful role in demolition activity, has been denied. There has been a constant level or lack of accountability of this administration, which we clearly need to address. And the only people who are going to hold this administration accountable are the voters of the city of Detroit, which is why August 3rd becomes the most critical date that we have to face. We need to send a strong message that accountability starts on August the 3rd, that we've got to change the trajectory of what's going on in this city, that the people in this city need to be treated with respect, that the citizens of this city need to understand there is someone who will fight for them because their right to exist in this city needs to be respected. And so I am challenging this administration and this mayor to withdraw his petition, because he has shown that he does not have the ethical or moral compass to lead this city, because he has not been held accountable. And so the most that he could do, and the best thing that he could do, is step down from office, withdraw his petitions, and allow the election to take place without him not being involved in it. And so I will open the floor up for questions. Well, you know, what we're dealing with here is a question of, I would call it a semantics. What we have is a situation where clearly action was taken that was not appropriate, that emails were deleted in contravention of city policies. That finding has already been made, was made by the Inspector General. And so now to say that there was no level of illegal activity involved in it, I would take issue with that, because in all situations where other politicians in this state have been accused of misdeeds or malfeasance in office, they've been held accountable. And for whatever strange reason, this mayor will not be held accountable until the voters of this city decide to remove him from office. Well, the evidence was clear. When you have a clear conscience of guilt of ordering someone to take action, when you have critical parties involved in it to take the fifth, when you have actions where people say they were wrong or they were immoral or unethical, I don't know what more the Attorney General would need. But my battle is not with the Attorney General, because this issue is about how the voters of Detroit will hold the mayor accountable. And I believe that the level of accountability that we need in our city is that we need to remove him from office because of his multiple failures in office. We're talking about failure to properly manage the hardest hit funds program, where more than $500 million could have been used to save more than 150,000 people in their home, could have been used for that, and yet it was not. The failure to address the issue of $600 million in overtaxation, where it was counted as if the people lost their money, so what? That's not holding him accountable. The people need to be made whole for the monies that they were lost. where there's a lack of accountability in actually managing the demolition process, where you had contaminated soil dropped in our neighborhood, so our children were playing not only in contaminated soil, but in asbestos and lead-filled air. There was no level of accountability that's been held. And so when you talk about accountability and moving the city forward, clearly the issues with the Make Your Date are a small part of the problem. The major issue here is that there's been no accountability, and we need to move to a level of accountability in this city if, in fact, the neighborhoods and the people who live here are going to be respected. Well, he doesn't. So what he's telling us is that he really doesn't care about the citizens who actually live in the city of Detroit. Because when you talk about taking action to remove information from the city system, that's a disrespect to the people who live here. Part of the issue that we have to address is that there is no lack of concern for the people who live here. And so, for example, when the issue of $600 million in overtaxation was raised, he sloughed it off as if there was nothing he could do about it. But when there was a personal matter that he was interested in, and talking about addressing the issue of infant mortality in this city, which is still out of control, he moved heaven and hell to make sure that that program was funded. Why? We have to ask ourselves, why is that? When you had worthy black organizations that actually provide services in infant mortality were not even given a fair opportunity to address it. And so his nonchalant attitude about not caring is what we know he has. He doesn't care about the people who live in this city. He has no respect for the people who live in this city. Because if he did, he would not have taken the actions that he's taken over the last 8 years. Okay. So at the end of the day, this election is about race. It's about a race to determine whether or not the citizens in this city will be treated with the level of respect and dignity that they deserve. It's a race to determine whether or not there will be services provided to the neighborhoods outside of this 7.5 square mile district in downtown Detroit. It's a race to determine whether or not the $600 million in overtaxation will be provided and returned to the citizens in the city of Detroit. It's a race to determine whether the series of tax abatements and tax captures that are draining money away from our school system and our libraries will be returned. It's about a race to determine whether or not we're going to restore the glory of the city of Detroit and the respect of the people who live in this city. All right? Great. So I want to thank you all for coming out. We know there is an attempt to stifle media coverage because they want to suppress information, and we're going to continue to be out at every opportunity to talk about our vision for the city of Detroit, how we move the city forward with respect to providing the resources in our neighborhoods. How do we make sure that our returning citizens are provided with the opportunity to re-enter society? How do we work with our community development corporations to ensure that they can get land from the land bank? It's a major issue with respect to community organizations in this town who have tried to get land from the land bank, and yet they can't get it, but favorite developers of this administration, people who are funding his campaign, the millions of dollars of campaign money that the mayor is getting to fund his campaign on the back of the citizens of the city of Detroit, and they are not giving what they need in order to move forward. What I would say to that is that he's not concerned about anything as it relates to the people who live in the city of Detroit. You see, the problem that my opponent has is that when you don't own property in the city of Detroit, when you don't pay property taxes in the city of Detroit, you have a less of a concern about the people who live here. And this constant attempt to try to minimize people's feelings about what goes on in this town shows his lack of empathy for what's happening in the city. All right. Thank you. Okay. All right. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Well, one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to restructure our relationship in the community development area. You know, part of the problem, as I see it, is that not enough resources are being devoted to community development corporations that actually do the work. We have a large, massive bureaucracy of people who actually administer economic development, and yet very little of those funds are going into the neighborhoods. We need to put the money in the neighborhoods. There is a clear narrative of what goes on between downtown Detroit and what happens in our neighborhoods. All you have to do is ride through the city to see that. Here we have a beautiful park downtown, and yet when you go in some of our neighborhoods, the parks aren't as pretty. And so we've got to change the nature of the relationship. We got to begin to focus on home ownership in this town. There is not a commitment to restoring the level of home ownership that we used to have. We have a city, Detroit, that has more people who rent their homes versus own their homes. And so to the extent that we need to provide home ownership opportunities, we need to have an intentional focus on providing that in our neighborhoods. We don't have an attention to that. We don't have an attention to even deal with the disparities in health care as they exist in the community. I found it, quite frankly, very offensive that when they asked about the low vaccination rates in the city of Detroit, my opponent's response was, well, the people are poor. The vaccine hesitancy has nothing to do with economics. It has more to do with trust in government and the people who are actually communicating the issue about vaccine and the need to get your vaccine in the community. You can't tell me that if Coleman Young wasn't mayor of the city of Detroit that our vaccine levels would be much, much, much higher, because there is a relationship of the person in the office with the community, which we don't have. And so what I'm saying and what I'm suggesting is that when you tell me that he doesn't want to hear from his critics, well, he's going to hear from me every day of the week, every hour of the day. Because when you point out the problems of how he's failed to properly administer the city, how has failed to properly respect the people who live in this city, I'm going to be on your behind every day of the week. Because I believe that the voters of this city need to understand the problems that are existing and the failure, the lack of accountability that exists within this administration. Okay. All right. Thank you.